the day you saved my soul till the very moment when I go home. I'll sing, I'll dance, my heart will overflow from the day you saved my soul. With brilliant light is all around, and endless joy is the only sound. Oh, rest my heart forever now. Oh, in your arms I'll always be found. From the day you saved my soul till the very moment when I come home, I'll sing, I'll dance, my heart will overflow from the day you saved my soul. My heart is yours, my heart is yours, my life is yours forever. My love is yours, my heart is yours, my life is yours forever. From the day you saved my soul till the very moment when I go home, I'll sing, I'll dance, my heart will overflow. From the day you saved my soul, from the day you saved my soul till the very moment when I come home, I'll sing, I'll dance, my heart will overflow from the day you saved my soul. From the day you saved my soul.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears have gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again to my family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. by the arms of the Father. I am surrounded by songs of deliverance. We've been liberated from our bondage. We're the sons and the daughters. Let us sing our freedom. Oh, 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 You split the sea so I can walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I will stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I can walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I will stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am a child of God.
Your love is devoted, like a ring of solid gold, like a vow that is tested, like a covenant of old. Your love is enduring through the winter rain and beyond the horizon, with mercy for today. Faithful you have been, and faithful you will be. You pledge yourself to me, and it's why I sing. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Oh, 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 You father the orphan, your kindness makes us whole, and you shoulder our weakness, and your strength becomes our own. Now you're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty from ashes. For you'll have your bride, free of all her guilt and rid of all her shame.
praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You will be praised, you will be praised with angels and saints, and we sing, worthy are you, Lord. You will be praised, you will be praised with angels and saints. We sing, worthy are you, Lord. And it's why I sing, your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are.
Where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
So teach my song to rise in you. When temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay.
Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. You're my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
My one righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
So if I had a set of drums up here, I'd have somebody do a drum roll. We're going to do chapter 25 that we've been waiting on. So we'll be in Numbers chapter 25, a little bit 26. And 2 weeks ago when we were last here, we looked at King Balak, the king of Moab, hiring the false prophet Balaam, and he wanted him to come and curse Israel. If you remember, Israel they were moving towards the promised land. They were encamped next to Moab, and King Balak was afraid that he was going to be overthrown by this large, over 2 million people, nation of Israel. However, as we saw, God prevented Balaam from cursing what he had blessed, and King Balak was pretty angry with Balaam and told him he needed to depart. And we can know, and we will know as we study further, that in that parting conversation that Balaam told King Balak that although God had prevented him from cursing Israel, there was a way to get Israel to curse themselves if he would just listen. That Balaam told King Balak, if you just send your women in to sexually tempt the men of Israel, that they will bring God's wrath upon their own heads. So we get to Numbers 25, verse 1. It says, And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they, the daughters of Moab, called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bow down to their gods, and Israel joining himself to Baal-peor. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. So just as Balaam had suggested, the men of Israel cursed themselves when they began to go after the fair young women of Moab. Now, when you have to start grasping the context with things you know. And one thing you know is that as we've studied at this point, not a single time has God interfered with a man of Israel going after a foreign woman. We've seen that he has protected the Hebrew women. He's protected the Hebrew women from foreign men, but foreign women have never been a God issue. It's been a morality issue, but not directly a God intervening issue with Israelite men. So we can see that, possibly that's not the great issue here. What is the great issue is in verse 2. It says, And they, the daughters of Moab, called the people into sacrifices of their small g gods. The greater issue here was, just as Balaam had suggested to King Balak, was idol worship, idolatry. God is a jealous God. Your Bible says God is a jealous God. He indeed is a jealous God. And he does not tolerate his people worshiping other gods. If you're one of his people, you need to bring that into your heart. God does not share. He does not tolerate your worship of another God. And I don't care what the other thing is that you worship. God will not tolerate that. And you need to understand. You need to understand why that is. Why is God a jealous God? Why is he so intolerant of the worship of other things? You need to understand that the underpinnings, the very underpinnings of Satan, the underpinnings of the fall of man, the underpinnings of evil, was Lucifer wanting to receive the worship that was only due to God. Do you remember what the first of the 10 Commandments were? Have no other God before thee. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So it was because idolatry was spreading through the camp that, as you read chapter 25, you see that God told Moses to judge the heads, meaning the leaders. It says lift the heads. You could read that and think he's talking about decapitation. He's not. He's saying judge the leaders of the groups, the leaders of the tribes who have allowed their people to start worshiping the false gods of Moab. And why were the men worshiping the false gods of Moab? They were worshiping these gods to gain sexual favor from these Moabite women. So God said to judge those leaders, and when they were found guilty, they were to be publicly hanged. Lift their heads up. They would be hanged for all to see as an example. So Moses then, in turn, he instructed the leaders of each tribe to do exactly this, to kill everyone in that tribe who was participating in idolatry. So as this was happening, as this was sweeping through the camp, as you read, there were people who were gathered at the door of the tabernacle, and they were weeping. They were weeping as this was going on. This was a horrible day in Israel. And as they were weeping in the door of the tabernacle, just then an Israelite man, a son of a prominent Simonite, went walking by with a Midianite woman. And it says that she was the daughter of a prince. So Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, knowing that this behavior, and Eleazar, if you haven't been following, he's the replacement of Aaron who has passed away. Eleazar is now the high priest. His son, knowing that this behavior in the camp had to stop because of this killing that was going on, he followed the pair into the tent and he killed them both with a sword. And the Bible says that the plague that God had brought upon the camp stopped. Now it's significant. There's something significant right there. Significant that you're told in your Bible that Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, ran his sword through the belly of the foreign woman. He ran a sword through her belly. That's a particular detail. He ran his sword through her womb, stopping what could be seen as a reproductive attack on the pure bloodline. In so doing, he also stopped God's wrath, his plague from Israel. So, I told you a couple of weeks ago, this is one of those places when I've been teaching the pure bloodline, and I get this chapter. My first read is, I think I have a problem, but then it causes me to dig deeper, and all of a sudden I say no. Every time I think that, the pure bloodline is verified. It's absolutely verified, and I'll show it to you. There's something that just happened there. Something I missed, a detail that I missed my first read through. We started talking about the women of Moab. Did you see there who the woman was that went into the tent? She wasn't a Moabitess. She was a Midian. We changed people all of a sudden right there. That's what I missed the first time through. So if you go read the commentaries. I always want you to go read commentaries, see what other people say. I read lots of commentaries. I just don't come unprepared. I read at least probably 5 commentaries every sermon I'm putting together to see what other opinions are on these things. But here's one of those points. If you read the commentaries or teaching to other pastors, this is one of those sections of the Bible where they think that there's nothing here, and they make really quick, high-level summaries and move on. So this chapter 25 is one of those places in the Bible that it's kind of devalued. People don't hold much value, and as we're seeing over and over, as I'm seeing personally, it's in those various sections that most people rush past that we find truth that is significant and I think amazing. And you'll see today that this is true of this chapter. So today I want you to see the details right before your eyes, and the detail that most people will miss and no one that I read can explain. And it's just as I told you, let your eyes see verse 1 and see who the daughters were. They were of Moab. And then drop to verse 6 and see that we changed. Just as I told you, we now have a daughter of Midian. Different people. Moab and Midian are different people. So what just happened? Well, the Moabites and the Midianites both lived in the wilderness. The land of Midian was further to the south. But what you have to see in this is when a line is crossed, it's crossed. And that's true of every situation, every relationship. When a line is crossed, it's crossed, and you can't uncross it. It's especially true for you married folks. You need to understand that. When a line is crossed, you can't uncross it. When something that has, and that's what's wrong with our society. That's why you see these school shootings, because lines have been crossed. Where the unthinkable is now an option, it's forever an option. When the men of Israel crossed a line and they started fraternizing with the women of Moab, they couldn't uncross that line. Now foreign women were okay. So all of a sudden, and understand, this didn't happen in a day. Balaam didn't stand on that high point and tell King Balak to tempt Israel with women, and they will curse themselves. This thing developed over time. Sometimes when we read our Bible, we read pretty precisely and finite, and some of these events take time to develop. You know, verse 25:1 says, Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began. It didn't say they did, it said they began to. So we find over the course of time, as these men of Israel started fraternizing with the foreign women of Moab, also somehow the Midianites begin to fraternize with them as well. And, you know, I can't perfectly tell you what is going on here, but that this prince of Israel was with a daughter of a prince of Midian, you know, I can speculate, and I will speculate that perhaps what was going on here was that this was an arrangement. It was part of a treaty. It was that maybe the Midianites wanted to team up with Israel, maybe for financial gain. This is a big population, over 2 million people. There's trade that could be had. But maybe they wanted to have Israel to help them to defeat Moab. I don't know, but I can speculate that that was some key detail about who those two people were that were headed into the tent, that we can know who they were. Something was underfoot there. So, as we're seeing, when Balaam first told King Balak to tempt the men of Israel with the women of Moab, and that would cause them to commit fornication, but would cause them to begin to accept the worship of false gods. But we get to verse 6, and now this Midianite, in verse 14, it says that she was with a prince of Israel named Zimri of the tribe of Simeon, and in verse 15, she was the daughter of one of the leaders of Midian. So again, you start to see that this is a brokered agreement going on here. 25:16, and it says, and the Lord spake to Moses, saying, vex the Midianites and smite them, for they vex you with their wiles wherewith they have beguiled you in the manner of Peor. Remember Peor? That's where King Balak and Balaam were on that high point of Peor talking. And in the matter of Cozbi, the daughter of the prince of Midian, their sister, which was slain in the day of the plague of Peor, for Peor's sake. So detail. In you start to look at, chapter 26. Let me remind you, when we started chapter 22, I told you that for the first time we stepped out of the context or the view coming directly from Israel, and all of a sudden we were looking at an event through foreigners' eyes. Well, when you get back to chapter 26, the story comes back to you from Israel's view, from their experience. And as we were reading about the conversations between King Balak and Balaam, that if you remember, it resulted in the plague of the fiery serpents, all the way through chapter 5 and chapter 26, the narrative returns to Israel, but of the same time. It's what was happening in Israel as King Balak and Balaam were looking down, trying to curse him. All of a sudden, we're stepping back, and So this is what was happening there. Now we're going to look at what was happening in Israel at the same time. And both of these stories will come together in chapter 31 with the resulting war. So chapter 26, verse 1, it says, "It came to pass after the plague of the fiery serpents that the Lord spake unto Moses and to Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saying, take the sum of all the congregation of take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel from 20 years old and upward throughout their father's house, all that were able to go to war with Israel, in Israel. And Moses and Eleazar the priest spake with them in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, saying, take the sum of the people from 20 years old and up, as the Lord commanded Moses and the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt." So what this is saying is God had Moses conduct a second census. If you remember when this book opened, when the people were ready to go into the promised land, God had them counted. They refused to go in. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Their children are getting ready to go in. God wants the people counted. And I think without Moses directly knowing, one thing that God was doing, he was preparing them for this war that was soon coming. They were going to soon apply the army of each of the 12 tribes. And if you jump ahead into chapter 31, you can see that even though this entire situation was started by King Balak of Moab, who was using the Moabite women as weapons of mass seduction. How's that for a term? Weapons of mass seduction against the men of Israel. The resulting war in chapter 31, Moab's not even mentioned. It's between Israel and Midian. So let's jump ahead a little bit. Numbers 31:1, "Then the Lord spake to Moses, saying, take full vengeance for the sons of Israel and the Midianites. So they made war against Midian, and they killed the kings of Midian, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with the sword." So here's the question. Here's what we're working towards, is why was the wrath of God as exercised through Israel directed against the Midianites and not at all against Moab? Now, as always, when we get to a difficult question, you need to remind yourself of the importance of a pure bloodline. And you need to do that so you can find the proper context. Because I'm telling you, the entire story of the Old Testament is about delivering Jesus Christ from the pure human bloodline. That's it. That's the whole story. And what God had to do to bring that bloodline from Adam all the way to Jesus Christ. So we have to do some work. We have to understand, where did these Moabites come from? Now, where did the Midianites come from? Well, who exactly were the Moabites? Well, they were people who had descended from Abraham's nephew Lot. You remember him? And remember, Abraham and Lot descended from Noah's son Shem. This is the beginning of the pure bloodline. And when this will be useful to you, when you hear someone today talking about someone being anti-Semitic against the Jews, the term really points to they're against the descendants of Shem. Clear back there. Now we go back to the book of Genesis and we see that Abraham and Lot, we've followed that. We've done that work. They were of the pure human bloodline. And that bloodline had stayed pure from Adam through Noah, through Shem, through Abraham and Lot. And we know something because we've been reading our Old Testament. We know what happened to Lot. We know the story. That as God was taking Abraham to the promised land, Lot went his own way and he settled there at Sodom and Gomorrah. And he was there when God came down to destroy those 2 cities because of homosexuality. We read about Lot and his family fleeing to the mountains. His wife disregarded what the angel had said. She looked back, you remember, and turned to a pillar of salt. So Lot and 2 of his daughters were the only ones who survived God's wrath in that event. And the 3 of them were living alone in the mountains. And the Bible tells us they believed they were the only ones left on the earth. So Lot's daughters devised a plan to get him drunk, to have him impregnate each of them, which is what happened. And reading that story, we get a key piece of information. Let me read to you from Genesis 19:31. It said, "And the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there's not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father." And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He perceived not when she lay down, nor when she rose. And jumping forward to verse 36, "Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father, and the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab. The same is the father of the Moabites to this day." So we see something. We see that the Moabites started from the pure bloodline. It's pretty clear. So since Lot, and that's the point you need to see, since Lot and his daughters were of pure blood, so were their offspring. So was this Moab, who started Moabites. And I told you when we were back there in Genesis chapter 19 that God had the Moabites secured in the wilderness. They were pretty isolated. So in the Moabites existed a strain of the pure bloodline. Now, am I saying they were all pure? I'm not saying they were all pure. I'm saying God was managing a remnant strain of the pure bloodline in the Moabites. And we'll see in our Bible later, and I'll tell you some of it today, why this is important. It's important because Satan would have been focusing his attention on Israel. It would have been focusing all of his attention on the Hebrew people. And focusing his attention on the Hebrew people, he was overlooking what God had off to the side in these Moabites. So why was this remnant bloodline important? You get to Ruth 1:1, it says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and 2 sons, and the name of the man was Amalek. The name of his wife Naomi, the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Amalek, Naomi's husband, died. She left with her 2 sons, and they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Ophrah, the name of the other was Ruth." So you'll see that Ruth was a Moabitess. So while Satan was focused on stopping the Hebrews, God would extend the pure bloodline using the union of this Moabitess, Ruth, and an Israelite named Boaz. Pretty significant, I think. And I think even when that union came, that for a time Satan would have overlooked the offspring of that union, thinking that this Israelite man has brought in a wife of mixed blood, that these are not on my radar. So the pure bloodline would be extended through Boaz and Ruth, eventually all the way to Jesus Christ. And this is why coming back to where we're at, God did not have Moses to attack the Moabites. He didn't have Israel. We're at a place where Israel is going to start wiping out people, men, women, and children. Protect the pure bloodline. But he's not going to allow them to touch the Moabites. Because to wipe out the Moabites would have wiped out that strain of the pure bloodline that would one day give us Ruth. Significant? I think it's extremely significant. And I can't find anyone else that writes of this. I don't know why God allows us to see things here, but God allows us to see things. So likewise, we need to understand who the Midianites are. The Midianites, of course, were descendants of Midian. Midian was of mixed blood. He was of impure blood. He was the son of Abraham and his late-in-life wife, after Sarah died, whose name was, if you remember her, Keturah. So Genesis 25:1 says, "Then again Abraham took a wife, her name was Keturah, and she bare him Zimran and Jokshan and Midian and Ishbak and Shuan." So the Midianites were all of mixed blood. So you can see clearly, I think that the issue resulting in this war and the killing of Midianites wasn't simply about idolatry. It was ultimately about protecting the pure bloodline. It was ultimately about bringing Jesus Christ. Idolatry was a problem with both countries, Moab and Midian. The pure bloodline, the threat to your pure bloodline was significantly a threat brought on by Midian. And the Midianite woman was stabbed in the womb, as I showed you. So back to chapter 25 for a moment. It says, where both the Moabites and Midianites were attacking the men of Israel with the seduction of their women. But we can see, we know that God is going to use Moab to deliver Ruth in the future. So God told Israel specifically, go attack the Midianites. And not only were they a genetic threat, but as I said, they might have been trying to broker a deal where Israel would join them in defeating and wiping out Moab. Numbers 25:18 says, for they vex you with their wiles, wherewith they have beguiled you with this matter of Peor and the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of the prince of Midian, their sister, which was slain in the day of the plague for Peor's sake. He says, slay them because they did what Balaam suggested when he was with King Balak overlooking Israel from the top of the Mount Peor. It seems we're getting to the point of the Bible where it all seems so harsh, where Israel is wiping people out, where God is telling Israel to wipe people out. But because we understand the pure bloodline, we can understand. We can understand that if Israel began to wholeheartedly accept idolatry, they would begin to wholeheartedly mix with other people. In this case, the Midianites. And that would pollute the pure bloodline that God was working so hard to protect and extend into the future to deliver Jesus Christ. So as we move into this section of the Bible, as I've said, where Israel is going to wipe out nation after nation after nation. And this is where so many people get offended at the Bible, saying this is so cruel, God's so cruel, he's so bloody, it's so unfair. They can't understand because they don't understand the pure bloodline. If you remove the knowledge of the pure bloodline, God's an awful God. That he would just favor this people and then he'd say, go kill everyone else. But once you grab a hold of what he was doing through the pure bloodline, that Jesus Christ is going to become the kinsman redeemer of humanity, he had to come of that pure bloodline to do that. Then all of a sudden it's amazing what God has done for you. That if God didn't do this, if he didn't have Israel wiping out all these people, if he didn't so carefully protect the pure bloodline of Israel, the pure human bloodline would have been lost and Jesus would never came. And there would be this many people going to heaven. So although it's harsh, sometimes it is harsh. So that's what I have for you. And I was so excited about this, and I felt like I stumbled around so much, and I hope you could follow it today. Maybe what excites me doesn't excite everyone else, but I was excited today.